Does baseball look the same to you as it does to me? When we look at baseball, how much do we see? Well, the curveballs bend and the home runs fly. More to the game than meets the eye. To get the stats compiled and the stories filed, fans on the internet might get riled, but we can break it down on Effectively Wild.
Hello and welcome to episode 2313 of Effectively Wild, a baseball podcast from FanGraphs presented by our Patreon supporters. I am Ben Lindbergh of The Ringer, joined by Meg Rowley of FanGraphs. Hello, Meg.
Hello.
So Jesse Chavez is back on the Braves big league roster. Maybe he will save them in his latest return. But more interesting to us, I think, in old pitcher news is that Rich Hill still is one. He is still planning to pitch this year. He is still throwing. He is hoping to sign soon. There was an update this week. Reportedly, multiple teams have shown interest in Rich Hill, who turned 45 last month. Yeah. I don't know what that interest consists of or how ardent the interest is, but apparently one of the teams, multiple teams, that means one of them is not the Red Sox.
Right.
And one from the AL East that is not the Red Sox has shown interest in the 45-year-old lefty, assuming one of them is also the Red Sox, because it'd be weird if there were multiple teams interested and one of them wasn't the Red Sox, given his history with that franchise. Yeah. But maybe we'll have an AL East bidding war. He'll be the difference maker in a tight division. Can't say he exactly served that function, filled that role last year, but another year older, another year wiser, just more experience under his belt. I think it could be time for the big comeback. So it warms my heart to know that Rich Hill is still out there throwing, thinking of himself as an active pitcher, and that there are teams out there that are thinking of him that way too, potentially.
Does it make you feel a little nervous about the veracity of the reporting that he is not just already a Baltimore Oriole? Like, does that
Yeah,
because if ever there were a team that should have some interest and put pen to paper, it seems like it should be that one. Although, as we have noted, like the tangoing, it takes two. Gotta have two to tango.
It's true. Yeah. Maybe they've just been burned by 40-plus pitchers with Charlie Morton's performance this year. And
you might be cooked.
I know. Sad to see that because, as I've discussed, I've enjoyed his career. And it looks like he may not be long for the starting rotation if the major league staff. But yeah, they could use some help there, obviously, as we discussed the other day. And so you'd think that he would be on their list. They are 30th in WAR from starting pitchers. They are the only team that has a sub-replacement level starting staff to this point in the season. Wow. And they project to be 27th from here on out. So it's not exactly a case of, just give it some time.
Right.
The ship will be righted. Not necessarily, because the best guys on the staff are injured currently, and then question marks about everyone else. But you would think that Rich Hill, they've reached the Rich Hill point of breaking glass in case of emergency.
Oh, yeah, definitely at that point. And I don't mean that as an insult to Rich Hill.
We would never.
We wouldn't dream of it. But we also would note the obvious limitations of a man of his advancing age, but also say, hey, why not give that a go? Why not give it a try? Because things are pretty grim there. Anyway, yay for Rich Hill.
Yeah. Fingers crossed. Hopefully there's some exciting signing news soon. Because last year with his kids' Little League, he wanted to be around because he's Rich Hill. Seems like a good guy. But he wanted to do the ramp up later in the season plan. Yeah. And maybe that depressed interest somewhat, although he did get signed ultimately and have a quick big league audition. But this year it seems like he's been more committed from the start to pitching. And hopefully that will lead to commensurate interest. So developing story. We will report as there are additional developments here. Yes, exactly. And on the opposite side of things, youth-wise, age-wise, just wanted to talk about James Wood for a second because I'm really enjoying the shape of James Wood's production.
I thought you were going to say the shape of James Wood, and I was like, well, he is very tall.
Also that, yeah. I mean, those things do go together because he has somehow managed to make it work despite having a profile that would not suggest that it was conducive to offensive success. And yet he has been an excellent hitter. Yeah. And I am not going to call it a breakout because, again, I anticipated James Wood being good because why wouldn't you? He was pretty good last year in his first taste of the majors and tippy-top prospect and all the tools and everything else. He was on everybody else's breakout list this year, and so I'm sure that some people are considering themselves vindicated because he has a 156 WRC plus thus far. Yeah. He's walked a lot. He has 8 dingers. You look at those stats and you would think, wow, this is a great offensive profile and he's put it all together. Yeah. And yet he hasn't really.
Not yet.
That's the really intriguing thing.
Room.
Yeah. Yeah. The results are there. And yet the process, it seems like there's a lot of room for improvement. And I don't know whether that means that he is just unique and he can make this work without the typical profile that leads to offensive success, or it means that when everything clicks, it's just going to be scary because if he can do this, so he is now hitting ground balls 60% of the time. So 60% of his batted balls have been on the ground thus far. The only player who has a lower percentage of pulled balls in the air to this point, he has 1.6% of his batted balls. It's like, I guess, 2 or 1 of them, maybe 1, I think he has hit in the air on the pull side thus far, because for a while it was like he hadn't had one yet. I think he finally got one, but maybe just one. The only guy with a lower percentage of pulled balls in the air is Ground Beef himself, Yandy Diaz.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he is also a very large and strong man who has made it work despite often hitting the ball on the ground. He hits it so hard that it's okay when he gets a hold of one. And he did like have a little bit of a breakout at one point where it seemed like he was getting the ground ball tendency under control, but then it didn't really stay that way.
A breakout?
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm okay.
Breakout.
It was a power breakout.
I'm giving you guff, Ben. I'm giving you some
I know
guff.
that you are. But I think Yandy Diaz, he was a guy who broke out at one point or seemed like a breakout candidate. But he's still hitting the ball on the ground almost 60% of the time. He hasn't totally changed his ways.
He does not have a 165 WRC plus this year.
Yeah. But James Wood is so strong that he just goes oppo constantly. Right. He almost has that Stanton strength. And Stanton, he will pull balls and they'll just be Titanic taters, but he will also hit oppo shots that like no one else can hit, like off the bat, the trajectory of it. You just wouldn't think that could possibly clear the fence. And then it does because it's Giancarlo Stanton. Yeah. And James Wood has a little bit of that too, where somehow he's hit 8 bombs while barely hitting the ball in the air because I guess on one level he doesn't need to because he has so much strength to spare that his home run distance, it's like, okay, if he could pull some balls in the air, he might clear the fence by 50 feet instead of a few feet. But as long as it gets over, it doesn't make that much difference ultimately. And it's not like he's been super lucky, like his expected weighted on base is higher than his actual weighted on base. His BABIP is low. So it's such a compelling profile where he has just all the promise in the world and he's doing really well. And yet it seems like he's not even close to tapping into his potential.
It helps to be 6'7", like that's going to be a boost to your raw and in-game power. But his ability to actualize it so far, given the ground ball rate, is pretty phenomenal. I need him to continue to do well. How long does he need to do very well before he displaces James Woods as the top Google result when you start to type in James Wood? Because, you want to bump one down.
I'd rather hear from James Wood. Yes. Yeah. You look at his baseball savant percentiles, and he's in the nutty. Mid 90s to high 90s in basically all of the batted ball quality. Yeah. exit velocity, hard hit, bat speed, all of it. Not like sweet spot squared up. There's room for improvement there, but he's absolutely crushing the ball, and he's crushing it so much that he doesn't even need to hit it on optimal trajectories all the time. So I'm kind of torn by what I want to happen here.
Right. Do you want to maintain the extremity and see how long it can persist, or do you want him to make an adjustment and then like really realize his full potential? Yeah.
Yes. So I guess if he has it in him to be Aaron Judge, basically, like if it turns out that he's doing this with one hand tied behind his back, basically, and if he can make the mechanical change and he can lift the ball and he can pull the ball, imagine how much better he would be in theory. But then again, maybe this is just his profile as a hitter and it's not completely changeable. And if you actually got him to hit the ball in the air or try to hit the ball out front more or whatever, like maybe it would hamper him in some other respects. And maybe there are limits to his malleability, perhaps. And if you mess with his success, maybe it would actually hurt in some respects, even though he'd be closer to conforming to what we think of as the desired profile for a player. So if it's possible that he could make some tweaks at some point in his career, and he's 22 years old, he has plenty of time to do that.
Lots of time.
He's also quite fast, by the way, which, that's nice too. So he's got it all going for him. If he could make those tweaks at a certain point and just be a juggernaut and be the best hitter in baseball and an unstoppable offensive force, I'd rather see that. I would rather that he maximize his potential and reach his ceiling. But if it turns out that maybe this is his ceiling, that would be fun too. Because if he managed to make it work with seemingly a suboptimal approach, but compensating for that with his other physical strengths and skills. Yeah. Because we always say, like, we like biodiversity and we like different types of skill sets and different ways to succeed. It's kind of boring if everyone has the same approach at the plate. And so I like the idea that he would just say, no, I'm going to keep hitting the ball on the ground, and yet I'm going to hit it so hard. And when I do occasionally lift one, it's going to go out every time. And this will work somehow. And I will somehow be one of the best hitters in baseball despite this approach. That would be fun too. So either way, we win and the Nationals win and James Wood wins.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think from the Nationals' perspective and from James Wood's perspective, see, like...
Possessive, apostrophe S, to be clear.
It was a good movie villain, but things have taken a turn. Anyway, I think that from their collective perspective, if he is given the option to like be Aaron Judge or not, they'll probably be like, you could be Aaron Judge. That'd be fine. Like if you want to max
Let's
out
do that.
At Aaron Judge, who Jay Jaffe is just like, this guy's like a Hall of Famer though. Which is amazing. He didn't debut for so long. Anyway, that they would probably opt for that. And in terms of my confidence in sort of his long-term viability as a player, like he was obviously a very highly regarded prospect. He's quite talented. It feels ridiculous to say, I will have greater confidence in you as a player if you're Aaron Judge, because that's such a hard thing to do. Aaron Judge is singular in his own right. Anytime a guy has sort of a wonky profile, you do have to have like a lingering sort of nagging concern that it will not sustain itself, that, he will not be able to maintain this level of production with such an odd shape to that production. But I'm fine seeing how it goes. And I think that he has room for improvement as a player, even if the general approach at the plate remains the same and the outcomes of his batted balls remain sort of similar. Like you noted that he's fast, and he already has 4 stolen bases, but like he probably has additional room to grow there. Like if you look at his early season base running metrics, they're not so stellar, right? So there can be little bits and bobs of improvement. He's not a remarkable defender, for instance. He's in left for a reason, but like it's pretty cool. 6'7". You could just reach anything.
We keep talking about him having more room to grow. Like,
not in a
physically,
literal
probably.
sense.
Yeah, but he's put it all together, right? Like O'Neal Cruz, who has the same listed height. Now he's doing better this year too, and we could talk about that at some point. Yes, at the plate. He also.
Oh my gosh, Ben.
Yes,
it's
similarly.
bad out there, man. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
But even more so. Yes. Work in progress defensively, to say the least.
that's generous.
But
yeah.
at the plate, it's been a bit better this year so far, and I hope it continues to trend better.
Yeah.
But he has also felt like a very raw, if he puts it together. The difference is that O'Neal Cruz is 26 years old, and that is a very different proposition than being 22 and still having some tweaks to make and some polish to add. But yeah, it's been exciting to see what James Wood has done. And I guess since you brought up Judge, I almost do kind of take it for granted that he is just this otherworldly hitter, because we've seen him do this now for several years, except that he's Benjamin Buttoning in the sense that that's very hard to say.
It's hard to say, and it's also really difficult to envision because he ends up being so tiny at the end of that movie.
That's not
and
happening.
so now,
Aaron Judge is not shrinking.
I'm
and also
envisioning like a shriveled, but in my mind, his like proportions have remained the same. So he's literally just been like shrink rayed down to like being a shriveled small version of himself. That's what my mind is doing.
I think I added an extra ing on the end there that I didn't need to.
Benjamin
Buttoning. Yeah.
Buttoning. It's hard to say.
Yeah, I made it harder than it had to be, though. Yes. But because he's been doing this for a while, I just tend to think to myself, yeah, Aaron Judge, he's the best hitter in baseball. He's being Judge-like again. Right. But he does just keep getting better. Yeah. He is aging in reverse performance-wise. And he's off to this incredible start this year. And it does make me dream on what this season could be, because he's coming off of 2 11-plus win seasons in the past 3. And the one sandwiched in between was an injury year and other things went wrong. So, and he had a mere 172 WRC plus in that year. Just, a lost season for Aaron Judge, really. Yeah. But 206 the year before that, 218 the year after that, while being durable in those 2 years, playing almost every game, even as he was filling in center field last year. Like, he's done it all. And he started last season so slowly by Aaron Judge standards. Right. And so I felt myself getting greedy when he turned it on and went on that just superhuman run. I was thinking to myself, if only he hadn't slumped to start the season, we could be looking at an all-timer here. Right. And is that what we're seeing now? Because I don't want to just assume that he can keep coasting to a 250 plus WRC plus the rest of the way. We should not take that for granted. But
probably not.
For him to have slumped last season at the start, and for him, it was a slump. He still had a 115 WRC play. He's still an above average hitter, just way below Aaron Judgian standards. But after that, by month, it was 275, 279, 213, 271, 183. Maybe he ran out of gas there in September. And of course, we know what happened in October. So I don't want to discount that too. Until he does produce in October, I'm sure that there will be Yankees fans out there saying, yeah, but he hasn't done it when it counts. And I'm sure he says that to himself at times too. But if he could just excise that 115 from the start of last season and just do what he did the rest of the way, or do what he's been doing, then we're looking at what could be one of the best seasons of all time. I mean, he has been the best hitter since Bonds, but he has not been quite as good as Bonds at his peak, like when Bonds was posting 235, 244 WRC plus. It's not out of the realm of possibility that Judge could just do that. Right. I keep expecting, like, at some point this will end, because the man is 32. He actually is turning 33 on Saturday, 2 days from now. Wow. Yeah. Happy birthday, Aaron. Early birthday.
Happy early birthday, yeah.
And I guess it will be happy, at least on a performance level here, because he's been better than ever. And so I don't know when this will stop or when he will finally show some signs of age, but he sure hasn't yet. And I would love if he could just keep this up all year and have that one season that eclipsed everyone. I mean, we're looking at like Babe Ruth's Barry Bonds territory potentially.
very selfishly, it would be nice, I think, for the sport to, maybe this is cheap of me, Ben. I'm open to the feedback that I'm about to say something that's a little hacky, but to have one that isn't tainted by PEDs, to have a new year, right? And one that we could probably see a lot less of the Marises and Woodses. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, there's all this consternation about baseball as it's currently constituted. We have to do all these news cycles about how the sport is dying, and then we spend time talking about how that's silly. And I just think let's have a new record-setting thing, and one that isn't tied up in the stolen base piece of it. Like, we're much more comfortable having amnesia around the state of the ball and how it bops back and forth and how it changes than we are with like a big rule change. I'm going to land the plane here and make a point, I promise. Just like having this era as like defining offensive performance and having it be a new, beautiful, special thing that we point to and say like, now it's like we can just use Judgy. And I don't want to erase Bonds from the record or anything like that. And, my relationship with the PED thing kind of comes and goes. And obviously, like, he has other warts as a human being that perhaps I wish we cared about more than even the PED piece of it. But I think it would be very special to get to watch and to have it be something that is tied up so much in the hitting component rather than, a great home run threat and stolen bases. Because like, I'm not bothered by stolen bases now. I don't think they're all necessarily like cheapies with the rule changes, but it is a different rule environment than prior eras, and so you have to account for it, right? You have to do your little mental adjustment, and I don't think that that's necessary in Judge's case for two reasons. One, that's not really about the stolen bases, but also, when we talk about like the ball having changed on the juice ball era and this and that, you don't worry about it with someone like Aaron Judge, right? Like, he's sending the ball to Jupiter no matter what he's doing.
Yeah, like James Wood.
Right, like James Wood. Wood. I worry I say it wrong like every fourth time. This is part of why I'm emphasizing it. I'm not suggesting our listeners get it wrong. I'm suggesting me, Meg, gets it wrong sometimes. And I say James Woods. I don't mean James Woods.
No.
I mean James Wood. Tall. Player for the Nationals. Yeah. Didn't voice any Disney characters so far as I know, but it was one of his better roles, arguably. That Hercules, it rocks. Anyway, so I would just like to have it. And it's so exciting and it's so cool. And it's just like an amazing thing that he can do. And so, yeah, breaking news, record-setting season would be fun, But the home run thing, it did get it got a little joyless at the end, because there was just so much Maris. And I want it to be about this guy, less about that guy. When it's about like, and, if he has a record-setting season, it's not like he'll be able to do that without reference to the prior record holder. But I don't know. I just think it'd be cool. I'm in for a Judgian thing.
Yeah.
Also kind of related to Judge, but unrelated. And I don't mean this as a knock on the prior occupant of the booth, but when I watch the Yankees, I will often like do the radio overlay on MLB TV rather than listen to the Yankees booth, which isn't a knock on the Yankees booth. It's just like, I really like listening to Susan. And now Dave Sims is there with her. And man, I'm not knocking the current Mariners booth either, really, but man, I miss Dave Sims. Dave Sims and Susan, they're great together, Ben. They have such a nice rapport already. Like, it's really good.
It is nice. As I've discussed, I had a soft spot for John Sterling.
Sure.
He was my voice that I grew up listening to. And he had a unique kind of chemistry with Susan as well. And
he did.
So, but it's a different dynamic, but a good one.
Yeah, really nice. So anyway, if you're out there and you're like, I want to listen, I'm going to watch a Yankees game. I haven't all season. I might suggest the radio overlay because they have a nice rapport. Sims is great. He seems very happy. He seems like he's having a really good time. Not that he had a bad time with the Mariners, but I know he wanted to be a Yankees broadcaster for a long time. It's nice. It's a nice thing to hear. So anyway.
Interesting thing about Judge, of course, is that people will remember the 62 homer season, but that is not his best offensive
not his best
performance
year.
overall, right?
No.
Like last year was better on a rate basis, and overall he played just as much. And this year is on track to be better, potentially. I know he has a 500 BABIP right now and is probably playing a little over his head, as high as his head is, but like this is his established level. Anyone else with a 250 WRC plus, you'd say, oh, well, that's going to come down significantly. And with Aaron Judge, you have to start to wonder, like, is it? Like, what is his true talent actually at this point? Like, I guess his FanGraphs depth charts projection right now for the rest of the season, or I guess maybe this is rest of the season is 186. Yeah. So that's what Zips and Steamer think his true talent level is right now. Right. I'd take the over on that.
I think you might be right. I mean, it's always even for someone like Judge, I think that projection systems are generally right to be skeptical of players sort of maxing out their extremes. But yeah, he could do it. He could maybe do it, Ben. It's really amazing.
It would be nice if there were an untainted greatest season.
Right.
And look, I'm sure that there will be people who are suspicious of him too. And one of the most suspicious things about Bonds is that, well, aside from the physical changes, that he just kept getting better as he got older, which is not normal. That is to an extent what Aaron Judge is doing as well. Yeah. Now, he has always been huge, so he has not gotten perceptibly huger, so that helps. But
wait, what if he's getting like a millimeter taller every year? Every couple of months, he does in fact grow, and then at some point we're going to look up, and it's going to be like the torpedo bats, where we're like, when did this happen? And it's just been a progression over time.
It's below the just noticeable difference threshold where you're thinking, well, yeah, of course, he's always been big. We know that.
Like the sliding mitts.
Yeah, exactly.
They're getting bigger, I tell you.
Yeah. So it's also not like, Barry Bonds is going to be traveling around with Aaron Judge as he tries to break the single season WRC plus record.
Not. No.
This is not a storied record. It's a record that's subject to change as park factors get recalculated, et cetera.
It is a little loosey-gooseier in general.
This is a nerd thing that nerds care about, but that's who we are and who many of our listeners are. And so we will care about that. And it's just fun to see the dominance that he's had here. And there were concerns about how he would age. And understandable concerns. I remember Joe Sheehan regularly writing about this, and I kind of quibbled with his conclusion just based on the fact that Joe was looking at the history of tall hitters and saying, some of these guys just didn't age that well. Frank Howard or Richie Sexson or whoever, right?
Right.
And the counterpoint would maybe be Dave Winfield, who did last a long time and have a Hall of Fame career. And so Joe was saying, well, the track record for guys this tall, I may have mentioned this on the podcast years ago, I don't recall, but the track record isn't that great. But my comeback to that was, well, the track record is so limited of hitters this huge that I don't know that we can really reach any conclusions here.
Yeah.
A, there haven't been many hitters who've been that big, and B, there haven't been many hitters who've been that big and anywhere near as good as Aaron Judge. So we're talking about a handful of examples or not even a full handful. And so I didn't really think that you could extrapolate that much from that. That said, I think just there is a history in sports, and not even only in sports, just in general, of tall people are subject to various ills and ailments. It's one of the problems that goes along with that. Like, your body is just bigger. There's more wear and tear and strain. There's just more body to break potentially. Like there's more cell division going on. Like, things can go wrong, and he's putting a lot of weight on the joints and everything. And that's, one reason why they wanted to get him out of center field, like a little less of a strain on the body. And so I think in that sense, all else being equal, I'd probably say that someone who's super tall and big, maybe I would project a slightly steeper decline curve. But because he was starting from such a high point, I didn't know that that was such a big concern. Really, it was a bigger concern that he had injury issues and availability issues earlier in his career, which I guess you could say was connected to his frame. Who knows? But there were years there, like 2018, 2019, even 2020 shortened season, but he played half of it. So there were a lot of years there where he was not playing as much as he would have liked to. But 2 out of the last 3 out of the last 4, at least, he's been quite durable. So I don't know that will continue indefinitely, but I'd love to see just what he did last year without the slow start. And maybe he didn't have the slow start this year. Maybe he'll have a slow finish, or he'll have a slow middle or something. Like he may slump at some point, but the potential is there for him to just absolutely obliterate every offensive record.
It is such a fascinating thing because, like, I've watched this, I would say, is often more dramatic in, say, football than it is in baseball. But like when you are that size, the potential for your body to just like create enough force to damage itself, right? Yeah. Like I will never forget Jimmy Graham, who used to be a tight end, first for the Saints, then he was a Seahawk, and then anyway, they traded for him because they lost that Super Bowl, and they're like, we need a big guy on the goal line. And it was fine. And he just tore apart his own knee one year, coming down, and it wasn't a contact injury. He just, the force of his own body, the torque he created with his own body was enough to just like pull it apart. Mm-hmm. And so you worry about that kind of thing with these guys where they're like so big, did they just break themselves? But to your point, I just don't know that we have enough guys like that to feel confident that we can draw a conclusion, especially when it's a question of like, how does your own physicality affect your longevity? You're really into N of 1 territory on that stuff because so much is going to depend on the individual player, how their body composition and how tight they are and all kinds of stuff, right? Like it just seems like I understand why there is a broader skepticism, and I think that as you're trying to like fit a guy into a general heuristic so that you can project their performance long term, that makes sense to do. But I think that most people who are in that business would acknowledge that there are huge error bars as big as Aaron Judge, right? When it comes to that stuff, because it really just depends. Like you think about Judge's injuries, you're right. There have been times where he's been unavailable. Some of that has been like his body. Some of that has been like an outfield wall was designed badly, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you think about those things in concert with one another? It can be really challenging. It just would be so cool to be able to reach everything, but then cars would be hard to buy,
Yeah.
Like, does he have to shop at a special store? Is he a big and tall guy?
He is absolutely a big and tall guy.
I mean, he is a big and tall guy, but I mean like a literal, like he is a literal big and tall guy. But is he does he go to the big and tall guy store?
He needs some custom jobs, I would imagine.
Probably needs some, and like he can afford it. Good news for him.
Yes.
I think the part of his performance that I am actually finding to be the most impressive is the fact that he and his wife have a relatively new baby at home.
Yeah,
and
true.
He's doing all of this on, I don't know their domestic arrangements, so perhaps it's perhaps not, but I would imagine at least loud in there, even if he's not the one getting up and doing overnights. So
yeah,
that's amazing.
Dad strength for Aaron Judge, a scary prospect. But just don't take it for granted. What we're seeing here, this is historic. He's been great for a long time, but if anything, he's getting better. I know he came out of the gate with that 52 homer season, record-setting season in 2017, and we thought, oh, okay, this guy is great, but he's so much better now than he was then. So it's really, really impressive. Yeah, he's just putting on a clinic out there.
Levers.
I know. The giant zone, the calls that go against him. Yeah, it really is kind of incredible.
I wish he were funnier,
Me too. I've complained about the quotes, the boilerplate before.
I don't even mind them being boilerplate, but it's just like, and what am I doing complaining about a person I don't know? Maybe he's hilarious in his personal life, but I wish he were funnier. He's so He's very Jeter-esque
in a way,
that regard.
It's almost appropriate. He's just a giant who just mashes, like, do we need that guy to be funny also? Sure, I guess it'd be nice, but I just want him to be just huge man, Yankee pinstripes, just embodiment of the brand.
Yeah.
Just hulking out, just Hulk. Like, I don't need the comic relief from him necessarily. Some more, I guess, introspection or at least, deviation from cliches would be nice from time to time. But yeah, I just, he's a straightforward masher at the plate. He can do it all, though he's not like just a power guy. He's just an all around great hitter.
He's a great hitter.
He's batting .415 right now.
I know.
He's like become a contact hitter is the thing. He's striking out 20% of the time. Yeah. He's like, at least so far this season, has a better than average strikeout rate. When he came up, he was more all or nothing. And there was a lot of all. So it was still really fine, good. Yeah, but there was still a fair amount of nothing. He was striking out 31% of the time, more than that his first few seasons when the league strikeout rate was a little lower than it is now. And now, even though he's hitting for as much power as ever and doing it all and patience and all the rest, he has actually increased his contact too, cut down on the Ks. There's absolutely no flaw in his game at the plate. So yeah, let's all just appreciate it. Not that we weren't, but even I catch myself sometimes saying, yeah, Aaron Judge, we know he's great, but he's that great. So
yeah, we should definitely make sure to appreciate what we have, because it's a very rare and cool thing. And we might not see it again. I mean, even from him the rest of this season, like when, Jay wrote about Judge for us today, and he noted at the end that in all likelihood, we will see less of this, but, or a more muted, though still probably exceptional version of Judge, but maybe we won't. So maybe we won't. Let's dig in on it. Maybe it'll be great, greater.
Few other things. Other Ben Clemens wrote something about the fact that the players are running wild. The stolen base attempt rate is up yet again. And I had been paying less attention to this because I didn't have a bold prediction at stake this season. Last year, I had a bold prediction related to stolen base rates continuing to climb, which did happen, but I think a little less than I had boldly predicted. But there was some debate about, well, will it be kind of a consolidation year? And the first year with the new rules, everyone was running, and maybe now defenses will adjust and players will run less. And as Ben notes, defenses did adjust perhaps, but also players kept running a lot. So the attempt rate was higher. The unsuccessful rate was also higher. That's a weird way to put that, but there were more caught stealings and also more steals. Yeah, I could have just said the success rate was lower. That would have worked as well.
That would have worked too, yeah.
I twisted myself into syntactic knots.
Sometimes you gotta take the easier edit,
Yeah. But this year, they're off to the races again, and the rates are continuing to climb. And I don't know whether there's a seasonality to that, like whether it's an early season, whether, comparing one season to the next, you're comparing full year to early year.
Right.
As far as I recall, I don't think there's a huge effect there. Like you might say, oh, it's colder, you're getting less offense early on. Maybe you'd be more inclined to run. But I don't think it's a huge thing. Yeah. So, because early on last year, I think there hadn't been, as I recall, an increase. And I was starting to concede defeat with my prediction that there were going to be more steals. And then they turned it on after that. So I don't think it was right out of the gate from the get-go. Anyway, they're continuing to run more. And I am curious about what the ceiling is here. Will that continue indefinitely? Are they close to the ceiling now? And obviously, on the whole, scoring is down. I guess it's not down relative to the last year with the old rules, because 2022 was a low run scoring year too. That was 4.28 runs per game, and we're at 4.31 right now. So that's kind of interesting that the runs per game, and I know we're comparing full season to April, March here, but roughly in the same realm, even though the shape of the production has changed considerably, at least on the base paths. And maybe that just goes to show that the running game doesn't matter as much as the other stuff, which is kind of the conclusion that we've all come to. People lament the base running fundamentals. And I think if players are actually spending less time on that, maybe there's a reason, because not that they shouldn't pay attention to that too and try to optimize every aspect of their game. But if there's an opportunity cost there, work on the stuff that matters the most.
Yeah.
And I was noticing that, okay, so the runs per game, the OPS, it's all sort of similar to 2022. The batting average is maybe down a little bit more. But if you look at the steals, like the attempt rate, the success rate, so much higher. So in 2022, last year under the old rules, there were 0.51 steals per game. I guess that's per team game. And this year, it's 0.84. So as a percentage increase, that's a lot, with only a small increase in the caught steals per game, just from 0.17 to 0.22. And this isn't the most rigorous math, but if you took the difference in the attempt rate or the success rate there, so the difference between the 0.84 and the 0.51 steals per game, and then factoring in the caught stealing difference too. So that's a difference of like 0.28 bases per game that you're getting now that you weren't getting then because of the extra steals. And meanwhile, the total bases per game is down by roughly the same amount. So batters produced in 2022, 13.28 total bases per game, and now it's 12.92. So that's essentially equalized. So the hitting is a little bit worse, and maybe not that stolen bases count in total bases. I'm just saying artificially you could kind of factor that in because you're getting those bases while you're on offense, just not while you're in the batter's box. So it kind of comes out in the wash. It kind of equals there. It's like a little less offense, but also you're getting more bases on the base paths, and overall it's the same. And I guess the rules to relax the restrictions on the running game, it was never primarily about increasing scoring. That would be a byproduct, of course, and generally fans like more scoring, but it was more about the action on the bases and the contested plays, and we are getting more of that. So mission accomplished in a sense. It hasn't really rectified the whole offensive picture. Strikeouts are still high. Batting average is still extremely low, and you want more balls in play, and you want more successful balls in play. But that part of it, at least, has worked and is continuing to work.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
Yeah, it's like dramatic changes. It's very much if baseball were different, how different could it be?
How different would it be?
Would it be? Yeah, it's just like very different in one respect, but then overall, almost the same, almost identical,
same.
Not different at all.
Yeah.
Also wanted to highlight another study that came from the Oyster Analytics folks at Down on the Farm, the excellent Substack. Owen Riley and Maxfield Lane looked at something that I may have looked at some point in the past or talked about, but the old chestnut about how if you are a strikeout guy, you're inefficient and you're throwing more pitches to get those strikeouts. And so it's kind of a common trope. Pitch to contact. I'll be more efficient. I'll just get more outs with fewer pitches. I can go deeper into games. And the fatal flaw of that plan has always been that if you do get fewer strikeouts, it is true that on average, you throw more pitches to get a strikeout than you do to get a non-strikeout out. So as they determined here, the average number of pitches per strikeout is 5, essentially, or that's the median, average 4.9, whereas any other kind of out lasts on average 3.4 pitches. So it would seem like a good plan that, okay, if I want to speed things up and be more efficient here, fewer strikeouts takes more pitches to get those strikeouts. So I'll just pitch to contact and I'll lay it right in there and they'll put it in play, and then we'll move on to the next batter more quickly. But the pitfall of that approach, of course, is that a strikeout is almost always an out, and you get to move on. And that is not the case with a ball in play. Many balls in play become hits, and then those hits reset your counter. Essentially, all the pitches that you threw to induce that batted ball, they got you nowhere, because now you're just starting over again with the same number of outs. You're in an even worse situation. And so when you factor that in, if you look at it not in terms of pitches per batter, but in terms of pitches per out, then it changes completely.
Right.
And suddenly the advantage for the pitch to contact approach is entirely erased.
Yeah.
If not reversed.
Yeah.
And it turns out that, maybe it'll take you a few more pitches to get that strikeout. It's like the Blake Snell approach, right?
Right.
But if you have fewer guys on base and you actually get to bank that out, then it's going to help you in the long run, because the other guy who's pitching to contact, he's going to have a bunch of guys on base, and he's going to have to face more batters ultimately, even if he dispenses with each of those batters more quickly. And they also came up with clever ways to look at, do you go deeper into games?
Right.
And yes, even if their conclusion is, if anything, strikeouts lead to longer outings because you're not more efficient on a per pitch basis or per batter basis, but on a per out basis you are, and you can go deeper into games. And they controlled for the fact that guys who are getting more strikeouts are just generally going to be better pitchers. Even if you account for that, you can still go deeper into games. Even if, I guess, if you're a pitch to contact guy, you might be saving some strength and you might not be going max effort all the time. But even taking that into account, it's advantage strikeout pitchers. And I guess if you're facing fewer batters, then there's less of a times through the order effect potentially in those later plate appearances. So on the whole, I've just always been very skeptical of that piece of advice. Maybe there are certain times, depending on the score, depending on the count, depending on the batter, you want to have more of a pitch to contact mentality. But on the whole, I would say it tends to be pretty counterproductive. So when I've heard a player espousing that approach, or a coach even more so, I just kind of raise an eyebrow and think, I don't know. I don't know if that's actually going to benefit you in the long run.
It's funny because I want there to be a lot of different ways for hitters to succeed. And so embracing a high strikeout mentality seems like it's working across purposes with that. But there is something just also very aesthetically satisfying about a guy who can just be like, I don't know, hit it. And can really go at you and strike a bunch of guys out and have that be core to his identity as a pitcher. I think it's a more satisfying thing to watch a lot of the time than a guy who's I don't know. Yeah. But then in order to have a strikeout pitcher, you have to have hitters striking out, Ben. So then what do I make of that?
Yeah.
I guess the answer is every pitcher shouldn't be that, and then we kind of solve the biodiversity problem, even though I do find it satisfying. I really do, to watch a guy just be like, I don't know, try to hit it. Can't do it? Great.
Yeah. Sam wrote about this in connection with Paul Skeens the other day at his Substack Pebble Hunting, because it seems like maybe Skeens has taken a little off or not gone max effort all the time.
Do you think that's because he talked to us and we were like, hey, don't
probably.
blow out?
We put that question to him specifically, and maybe it was food for thought. He said,
he was like, wow, got to think about that.
What a perceptive
They're smart
question.
over there.
Yeah, I should revamp my whole approach. It's not as if he is transitioned into a soft tosser or something.
Right.
He has not hit triple digits this year yet, unless you round up. He's touched 99.9, but he hasn't quite hit 100. And last year he maxed out at but last year he maxed out at 101.9.
Right.
So the top end is a little lower, and I guess you can never say that's entirely approach. I mean, pitchers, even if they're young, they could sometimes lose a little velo, but I tend to think it's maybe more just not fully going all out all the time. And that has had some costs in a sense. His strikeout rate is down considerably, but his control has improved. He's walking fewer guys. Thus far, at least, he hasn't allowed dingers. He's still getting grounders. And he's been totally dominant, like a 2 FIP, even though he has less than a strikeout per inning, and even though he's throwing a little less hard than he would. That was the question that I had for him. Just can you make the Jacob deGrom adjustment at your age before you've had the elbow injuries? And his comeback, which was, I think, quite reasonable, was but a 22-year-old body is a little different from a mid-30s body, but then again, lots of young pitchers' bodies break too, so they're hardly immune. And maybe there is a little overconfidence of youth, this can't happen to me, right? Because it hasn't happened yet. But it's heartening to me because, as Sam pointed out, and as I always said about deGrom, he doesn't need to max out. He is so good and so dominant using a little less than full strength. His little less than full strength is still better than anyone else's full strength. So we'll see how his season evolves. But if he could put a 2 FIP out there while not touching 100, then I'd say he should do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think that anything that can be done to maximize his health with it, I mean, anything that can be done to maximize his health as a person, he shouldn't pitch at all because it's just bad for you no matter what. But like, you know, within the confines of him still being a major league starter, like I think that is a worthy trade-off. It doesn't guarantee that he is going to stay healthy because guys who throw less hard than him also blow out, you know. So you're trying to maximize your chance, right? You're trying to maximize your chance. Is he still doing the beard? I haven't. Yeah. I'm excited to. He is going up against Yamamoto, I think, tomorrow.
Yes, that's a marquee matchup.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. He's still doing the beard. That's good. Yeah. He should.
Yeah.
He should keep
the beard. It's a good move for him. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and also he probably is aware that he's not going to get any offensive support or bullpen support probably. And so he better stay in the game if he wants the Pirates to win. And yeah, it's bleak, but he does seem to care about durability and going deeper into games and being a traditional starter in that sense. And so yeah, I hope that he is wise beyond his years, and this is part of his maturation. And of course, he has all these new pitches, and so that helps too, without having to throw as hard as possible at all times.
He seemed like a really thoughtful guy when we talked to him. I appreciate someone who, this is true regardless of the like kind of area that you're talking about. Like I like it when people feel comfortable hearing a question and like pausing and thinking about it for a second rather than just launching into an answer. And, you know, there are plenty of people who they talk about whatever their area of expertise is for a living. We were probably the 99th interview he had done that day. So if he had some pat answers banked, I wouldn't have blamed him. But, you know, it makes you feel as the person talking to someone that they've really like been listening and actually considered responding to the question put to them rather than, you know, viewing it as an opportunity to sort of advance a particular answer they're keen to get out there and just leaving it at that. So he seemed like a thoughtful guy. And if he wants to pitch as long as he can, I'm sure, because like, you know, it'll be lucrative, it'll be storied. And the longer he's good, the more likely it is that he is pitching during a competitive window for the Pittsburgh Pirates, which still seems like it's a little ways off.
Yeah, gotta last as long as possible if you want to make it to the promised land with the Pirates.
Yeah.
All right, last couple things, and I guess they're kind of tied together. One is about Rob Manfred, and one is about private equity interest in baseball, which I'm sure is something Rob Manfred is in favor of to some extent. But there was a CNBC article that I read the other day. It was not the one that caused an uproar online because there was like a CNBC sports business reporter or just business reporter who like discovered that owners are in favor of a salary cap and thought that was breaking news, apparently. And also that like a salary floor has been considered breaking.
I really liked, I know that everyone's favorite thing is when you talk about what somebody posted on social media, but I really enjoyed Bauman reacting to that a couple of days later, being like, I was confused why this guy was still going. And then I realized he was fighting with Craig, and it's like, yeah, that tracks.
Like a dog with a bone, that Craig Goldstein. But we love him for it. But he does kind of tell you the importance of subject matter expertise, I suppose, because even if you're a journalist and a business reporter, if you don't report on baseball or sports and you're just like out of your depth, and I know what this is like, covering a variety of things, and I'm always wary of like, am I going to sound like I don't know what I'm talking about here because I don't, or I know less than I do when I'm on firmer ground. And so it's just hard to cover something when you're not aware of decades of history and literature. And suddenly you think you're the first person who's gotten the scoop that owners are pro salary cap and might also consider a salary floor if it's low enough. And of course, it was kind of written from a pro owner perspective, whether inadvertently or wholeheartedly. And so a lot of people took that piece to task. This is a different piece by a different author. The headline, MLB could draw greater private equity interest as uncertainties lie ahead. And the language in this piece was very much like, well, I'll just read you some quotes from private equity people who are quoted in here. There hasn't been a massive private equity gold rush to invest in MLB. MLB needs to get its house in order for the league to become even more competitive for investment. Institutional investors aren't going to commit and risk their capital when all it means is it's helping to fund an arms race of talent. I love that. It's like, we're not interested in just you signing players to make your baseball team better. Get out of here with that. Like, we want to make a profit here. If we can't turn a quick buck, then don't bother pitching us. And, you know, it goes on to say, like, one of the risk factors from this perspective is that there is no salary cap, unlike other major sports leagues. And so this is seen as uncertainty, risk. It's less control. That's how it would be viewed from the owner's perspective, too. That, in addition to the ongoing evolution of broadcast rights and not being sure how that is going to affect franchise values and profit margins, et cetera. Here's another quote. This is a moment of strategic transformation in which private equity capital could help smooth this transition period and offer strategic assistance. Baseball remains a great asset with great sports content. I've always said that about baseball, personally. That's kind of our position at Effectively Wild here, that baseball remains a great asset with great sports content.
Wow,
yeah, how can you not be romantic about the sports asset with the great sports content?
Yeah,
I mean, that's really what got us into sports and baseball from an early age.
I'm in it for the content. Really.
Yeah. When I remember going to my first game and seeing the green of the grass and, you know, the crack of the bat and thinking to myself,
content.
This is a great asset. You know, I had not considered how great an asset this was. This is some excellent sports content. So they will figure this out, and those that invest early will benefit. So first mover advantage, early adopters on baseball, this hot new game that we've got going on here, this new asset, baseball, with its fresh sports content. And it goes into talking about the rules changes and the younger audience and how those things are attractive and beneficial. And I think they are, not just from a private equity investment perspective, but
in terms of the content.
Yeah, it was to read about it in a business publication. Yeah. And it's not exactly like a quiet part out loud sort of situation, but just unadorned, just we're business folks. We're in this to make a buck and maybe millions or billions of bucks, ideally. Yep. And we're just going to say it in those terms. Like, we don't care about baseball. Like, we
care about the biz.
Yes, this is not for the love of the game. This is for the love of the asset.
Of the biz.
Yeah, and the great sports content. So, I mean, I do think that baseball, it does have a lot of sports content. That much is inarguable. There's a lot of inventory in baseball, and hopefully that's to its benefit in some ways and to its detriment in other ways, I think. But I mean, I guess I want baseball to thrive.
Sure.
But not necessarily as an investment vehicle unless that is a reflection of the overall health of the game. But, you know, if Rob Manfred talks about something like this, and he does, or if they talk about this stuff in an owners meeting behind closed doors, I'm sure they put it in these terms. Maybe publicly they wouldn't describe it as a great asset with great sports content. Occasionally Rob will, though.
Yeah.
and it's like not the mask will slip, but, you know, like he's a business guy and a lawyerly guy and a lawyer. And he's obviously, he's the commissioner. And but we always kind of crave from a commissioner. And this is something that Bud Selig, despite all his other flaws, like he did care about baseball, I think, as more than a great asset with great sports content. He cared about that too, to be clear, but he also did have a lifelong love of the game. And Rob Manfred either doesn't or has trouble conveying that he does. And so occasionally he will put it in more private equity friendly terms. And that's not what you want necessarily from a public spokesperson, unless they are in a pitch meeting, which I'm sure he is often. And you know, I want him to get favorable broadcast deals and all too. Not that it's going to personally enrich me, but I want baseball to thrive and want it to be widely available for as many people as possible, which is not always, I guess, the most profit maximizing strategy in the short term. Sometimes those things come into conflict. Anyway, sometimes he does the business speak. It was kind of entertaining for me to just see the business speak laid out without any affectations or any pretense to the contrary.
Can I get on a little bit of a soapbox about something real quick?
Okay.
This is like going to be the most annoying I've been in a while. Sometimes sports writers get like a bad reputation. Like what we do is assumed to be trivial because it's not like hard news, quote unquote. And every time the business press, and there are plenty of very good writers in that space. I don't mean to say that there aren't any. There's a lot of fluff too. There's a lot of fluff in sports writing. There's just fluff out there sometimes. But I really do think that it's an incredible training ground for being able to think about a lot of different issues and having to balance a lot of different perspectives and interests, because you can't be a sports writer these days and not be really well versed in labor questions. That's true regardless of whether or not you cover a league with a cap. You know, I think there are plenty of people writing about football who do a really good job of that, and basketball. And I'm sure that there are soccer folks who do the same thing, but I don't read them because I don't care about that sport very much. But you have to be versed in labor questions. You have to be able to talk about race and gender. You have to be able to talk about sort of municipal politics and state level politics when you think about the funding piece of this stuff for stadiums. And I don't know. I think it's cool. I think we get to touch a lot of different stuff and have to, and people should be nicer to us about it. So anyway, that's just me on my side. Be nicer to us because we're so smart and also do such a good job.
Yeah, there has historically been a little less of prestige associated with sports writing, or there's been a little bit of little brother, little sibling syndrome, or it's because like, even though sports are quite popular because they're a great asset with great sports content,
incredible content,
you know, they might be the thing selling the newspaper, but not the thing winning the Pulitzer or something. I mean, I'm sure sometimes they do, and there are sports awards and everything. But it was the perception of like, oh, it's the sports pages and the funny pages, and this is the lighter content. Yeah. And a lot of sports coverage has fallen into that category. But if you're going to be good at it and consider all the things that one should consider, then you do have to have a pretty broad understanding of society and culture at large, really, to cover sports holistically and effectively.
Yeah. So I just, wanted to say everybody's doing a great job. Keep doing what you're doing, because, it's not that Craig won't yell at other sports writers. He doesn't have to do it as often, it seems. So that's nice. I think it's okay for the commissioner of a sports league to talk in business terms to a business audience. I don't think that that's like inherently objectionable.
No, it's good, if anything, I would think. If you could code switch like that and sell your sport to that audience in that way, the language that they speak, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that that's okay, because it is a business. And I think that there needs to be fluency around that for the commissioner. I want there to also be sentiment and genuine affection. But I think we sometimes get trapped in like a sort of feudal cul-de-sac as a commentariat when we're dealing with Manfred, because there's like all this attention and time paid to like, does he love baseball? He hates baseball. And it's not who cares, but it's like, you're not going to know the heart of the man in a way that will either be satisfying to you answering that question or particularly meaningful, right? Like, it's just, he does or he doesn't, but he's the commissioner. So like, let's deal with him on the terms that he gives us. But I also think that there needs to be an appreciation, and I find it wanting on his part. I find it wanting on the part of many of the league's owners, that like, you are an owner of an asset with tremendous content, but that asset with tremendous sports content is also a civic institution. Yeah. And one way you know that it's a civic institution is that more often than not, we collectively have helped to pay for the building that institution occupies. And, it's about regional pride. It's about having a parade at the end. It's about being a really important fixture in a community. And I wish that even if it weren't the only thing that they cared about, because I am somewhat realistic about the way that like capitalism works, I wish that it felt closer to the center of the whole endeavor for people, because I do think that it's this special thing, and the only justification for its existence as something that we as like taxpayers pay for is if they have an understanding of it as part of our like civil religion. This thing that brings joy to people, that is a site of like democratic contestation, and like it brings people together. It helps to facilitate, or it should, even though this is hard now with prices being what they are for a lot of people, like it should be a place where like people mix and mingle and like, interact with folks who might not live in their neighborhood. And I think that part of it is really important. And I always feel a little like on my back foot when it's about like, let's bring the private equity folks in, because like their goal is profit maximization.
Yeah.
And I don't think that making money and owning a sports team and spending money on that sports team and understanding that sports team is occupying like an important place in a community, those things aren't necessarily working against one another. Maximizing profit ruthlessly might be working at cross purposes with that other stuff. So I get people being nervous because I share that nervousness. I do think that like it's okay for the business part of Rob Manfred to like speak to the business part of his job. It's so interesting too that there's not like, he's fascinating to me as a commissioner, because he doesn't often choose to make his own job easier from a PR perspective, right? Like he doesn't do that part well. And maybe because he doesn't do it well, he just opts to not do it. We've gotten a lot of sports content out of Rob Manfred, like not being able to do the sentiment piece of it.
Yeah.
And it's so funny that like he can't really do it very well. And Bud Selig could, and that man like was involved in collusion.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like he did like sports crimes and like oversaw baseball during the steroid era, but he could fake it pretty well.
Yeah.
Not all the time.
What finer baseball tradition is there than owners trying to suppress player salaries? I mean, that's that goes back to the beginning. So
from time immemorial, right?
Yeah.
And so I just find him fascinating as like a subject, Manfred, because he can't do guile, he really can't. And I find that useful. I worry, we've maybe talked about this before, so I apologize if I'm repeating myself, but like we know that his tenure is coming to an end. And I do have a certain amount of anxiety about the next person who occupies that seat being a better politician than Rob, because I think that there's something useful in him being unable to bullshit. Excuse the swear, but like he really can't do it. He gets flustered easily. There's all kinds of stuff, right? And so he's so fascinating. But anyway, yeah.
Well, that's the last bit of banter that I had was about the latest example of Rob Manfred saying something where you kind of question whether he's from this planet or whether he experiences sports the way that others do. And so this is, I guess, the sequel to a comment that he made a little more than a year ago. As you'll recall, he was asked how the league plans to maintain a presence in Oakland after the A's leave town. And his response was, first of all, we do have a major league team in the Bay Area. It's not like there is not an available option. The Giants obviously still play here. Now, as I recall,
this was not received well.
I condemned that a little less harshly than you and than many did. I kind of understood what he was saying. It wasn't like a good answer, but I thought it was valid to point out that you're not entirely like there will be no baseball toehold whatsoever in this geographic region. Like San Francisco's not the same as Oakland, even if they're both Bay Area. And obviously, I don't expect every A's fan to say, well, whatever, I'll just be a Giants fan now. That was kind of the implication, maybe. And so that part of it, that's silly. But I didn't think it was a bad point to be like, well, there's still Major League Baseball not too far away. Like, there are people who could become baseball fans in this area of the world and have access to our product, our great sports asset and its sports content. So I sort of saw what maybe he was attempting to say and thought it was kind of valid, even if the way he expressed it came out as basically like enabling the A's messy departure and then just being like, you can be a Giants fan, no sweat. So I understand why it was perceived that way. His latest comment in that vein comes from an LA Times article about how Dodgers tickets are expensive now. I mean, it's a hot ticket. It's not necessarily because they have a high payroll. It's because they have an appealing product, a really great sports asset. People want to go see the Dodgers play, and they will pay to see them play. And thus, the tickets are priced higher, and it's just expensive to go, and the concessions and the transportation and everything. It's not easily affordable to go to Dodgers games. And so I'll read this little passage here. Notwithstanding Manfred's belief that MLB does not have an affordability problem, a pop-up survey on the league website last week asked fans whether they strongly agreed, somewhat disagreed, or strongly disagreed with this statement: attending a Major League Baseball game is affordable. If local fans consider the Dodgers' prices too high, Manfred suggested where they could find a cost-effective alternative. Quote, one of the leaders in terms of thinking about affordability has been the other Los Angeles team, end quote, Manfred said. And he has a point in the sense that, yeah, Angels games are much cheaper to attend, and there's a reason for that. They do not produce as great sports content with the roster that they have assembled and the success or lack thereof that they've had. And so it's valid to say, okay, this is an outlier maybe. The Dodgers are one of one, and look, there are other teams that are more affordable, and so you can't generalize about the entire league. And hey, there's even one that is the closest team to the Dodgers that is much more affordable. And we've talked about how the Angels' attendance has been surprisingly robust, even as they have not put a compelling product on the field. And I don't know exactly how the conversation went. There's not a full transcript here, but it does say that if local fans consider the Dodgers' prices too high, Manfred suggested where they could find a cost-effective alternative. If it really was like that, if the author was like, hey, these games are expensive, what would you tell fans? And he was like, well, you can just go to an Angels game instead. Then that also speaks to that same question of, does he understand fandom? Like, is he familiar with the concept of allegiances to particular teams and how most people experience sports, which is not like if you are deprived of your favorite team or you're unable to afford their games, then you just default to, well, I'll go to the other team that's in the area. Right. That's not how it works. No. Maybe there are times when fandom should work more that way, but it doesn't. And you can't just expect people to say, well, they took this team away, but at least I can still go to this rival team and watch their games instead. Or I can't afford to go to a Dodgers game, but at least I can go to this quasi Los Angeles team. It's not as if you're just saying, I want to go to a baseball game and I'll take whatever you got. Right. Like if you want to see the Dodgers because you root for the Dodgers, then you're not going to be placated by going to an Angels game. It is not delivering what you want, which is Dodgers baseball, not just generic baseball played by anyone. Right. So I sort of understand his point, and yet the way he expresses this and has now multiple times does make me question, like, does he understand how people bond with baseball teams and how people experience sports?
Yeah, there is like it's like you're trying to widgetize. Widget is a weird word. Weird word. Yeah. Widget. I don't love saying widgetize. I feel like that sounds so odd. It's not a real word. That might be why. But anyway, yeah, it's like you're trying to, it's like, well, won't any baseball do? And on some level, I'm of the opinion that all live sporting events are good. And it doesn't matter what the sport is. And it doesn't matter if you know anything about either of the teams playing. Any time you can go sit at a live sporting event and have a snack and a beverage is a good time. It's just a good time. But it's a different thing to enjoy that good time versus I'm going to go see my guys. Yeah. I'm going to go see my folks. I'm going to go see my team, you know. We call it's the home nine. You want to see the home nine. Mm-hmm. So it is a weird understanding of the sport. It's also funny because, like, even if you were just hello, I am a generic baseball fan. I am in the market to see some baseball today. And I don't care the specifics of who, you still want to see the better team play more often than not, right? So it's not even really, it's like, okay, well, if that's on the table, you know how many college baseball programs there are in Southern California? You could go for so much less money. You know, if you don't care about who's playing, just go see any old, go check out some various Bruins and Trojans and all sorts of folks, you know?
Yeah, or minor league teams or just,
minor league teams.
Indie ball.
You could go see if all that you really care about is it being a bat to ball sport. There are so many good softball programs in Southern California. Go watch some gals play softball.
I just read about how cricket is finally getting a foothold in the U.S. So yeah,
really?
go watch cricket. I mean, it's just, it's not interchangeable. It's not just, I want to see some balls hit with bats. So,
and it's not to say that like all of those things aren't good on their own terms, right? That they don't have merit. They do, but they're not interchangeable. Yeah, it is sort of alien-like. I spent time saying we shouldn't, try to really unpack whether he loves the sport or not, but I would be interested in knowing if he's an alien. We spent all this time on Tic Tacs and congressional testimony from nervous-looking military folks to just diagnose Rob Manfred. That'd be a fun premise for a TV show, like he's an alien, but he has to be a commissioner of a major sports league. Why aren't we hearing about the drones anymore, Ben? You guys still talking about the drones in the local media market? What's up with that? Where did those drones go?
Got bigger problems, I guess.
I mean, yes, but also, what happened with that? Why no drone talk? Where did the drone talk go?
I don't know.
I don't know that I want to talk about the drones more, but the absence of talk of the drones is striking. It
has been striking. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe we're too worried about the planes. We're worried about airplanes.
Anyway, maybe this is something that someone should explain to Mr. Manfred just to make sure that he understands the relationships that fans have with sports, because this could have bearing on other decisions that he makes. Like maybe the way that he handled or didn't handle the whole A's exodus from Oakland, if he's just kind of thinking, well, all those A's fans, they'll get over it. They'll just be Giants fans instead. And also all these other people who don't have historic allegiances to the A's, suddenly they will develop them because, hey, it's baseball. It's like it's replacement level. Oh, there's baseball. We'll call up whatever form of baseball is easily accessible.
Right.
And no, you can actually sever lifelong ties to the sport if you take away one team, even if there is an alternative nearby, even if that alternative is cheaper. And I guess you could go see the Dodgers play the Angels in Anaheim. Maybe that would help, though I'm sure that would jack up prices too, because you'd have an influx of Dodgers fans. But you could go see other good teams and stars play the Angels. You don't have to watch the Angels alone. And the Angels got off to a better start than people were expecting this season anyway. So it's not irrelevant that there are also more affordable teams out there. But yeah, it's not a perfect substitute, and it's not going to really assuage anyone if they're saying, this is my team and I can't afford to go to the games and see my team anymore. Don't worry about it. Go see the Angels instead. What percentage of people are actually going to think, oh, yeah, that's a good answer. Why didn't I think of that? I'll just go see some Angels baseball, and that'll be just as good.
I mean, right now, it's not as bad as it could be.
No.
That's something. And I do think that, like, again, it's just like such a funny abdication of like a chance for good PR. Like it would just be so easy to say, I think it is incumbent upon all of our teams to have evenings that are accessible for families to see our great sport. That's all it takes. Like, is he really going to piss off Guggenheim if he says that?
Yeah.
And I'm sure that I would hope, I actually am not sure. I would hope that the Dodgers have like, value nights or whatever. Like a lot of teams, I think, are trying to have some evenings and some like in ballpark concessions or whatever that are more accessible. And I would imagine that the need for that might increase over time, depending on how the economy shapes up overall. So like, it would just be so easy to be like, I hope that all of our teams are exploring ways of making the big league experience accessible to families in their communities. That's all. You can't. It's not it doesn't seem like it's right there for him, you know?
Yeah.
And again, it's like, it's useful in a way for people like us who are trying to like help people understand how the sport operates. When you don't have to claw your way through fluff, it's a little easier, but it's so interesting, Ben.
It is.
Maybe he is an alien.
It would explain
I don't
a
think
lot.
he's an alien.
I don't think so either.
I want to be clear. Also, I want to remind people, because I still occasionally see confusion on this score on social media, that there has been a dramatic revision to the Otani dog question, right? That I have embraced new information and now think that that dog is a loving and loved member of the family.
Yeah.
Congratulations to Shohei and his wife on the birth of their baby. But I still think that my initial instincts were correct. But, you know, like a Netflix movie, things change over time. And now it's a beautiful dog-human love story. Not in a gross way, in a sweet way, in a normal dog owner dog way.
I'm glad you've made this partial embrace of reality. It's progress, I think. You're coming closer to life as I understand it in this particular situation.
And to be clear, I don't think that the aliens have been here, you know. Like mathematically there probably are other smart things out in the universe.
They're out there.
I don't think
it's just far away.
Far away. They're not particularly interested in our business down here, which is a mess.
Yeah. I meant to say, by the way, when we were talking about the stolen bases, that most of what we were citing there in terms of stats was before Chandler Simpson arrived. So now, with Chandler Simpson in the bigs, that's going to raise the roof on the steal rates even more, one would imagine. Guy who stole 104 last year. So
it's so cool, Ben. You know, like he stole one against the Diamondbacks the other night, and the helmet flew off. And it wasn't even like an amazing jump. He's just so lickety split. It's so cool. And like, he can, man.
That was
cool.
one of your bold predictions that he would lead the league in stolen bases. He arrived early enough to do that.
I know.
So, and I had one that was a player steals at least 80 bases. Now, he could lead the league in stolen bases without stealing 80, but maybe he will make both of our predictions come true. Yeah, because I am still waiting for just a game-breaking base stealer, because when we used to talk about Billy Hamilton in those terms, and Sam wrote about him a ton, and we talked about him on this podcast, and for a little while there, it looked like he would just break base stealing because he was so fast that the distance between bases would be too short for anyone to catch him, potentially, unless he fell down or something. And then that turned out not to be the case. Like, he was an excellent base stealer, but he could be caught. He wasn't invulnerable. It wasn't like as long as he held up his end of the bargain, no catcher could throw him out. And I'm still waiting for that guy to come along. Maybe it's Simpson, who knows? But someone who's just, you can't catch him if he gets even just a decent break. Just like something has to go horribly wrong for him to be caught, because especially with the rules that we have now and potentially being able to get a longer lead and everything, you'd think that we could get to that point where it would just be automatic, where you almost couldn't stop someone. And will Simpson be that guy? Will anyone be that guy? Or will that 90 feet between bases, less however many inches it is now because the bases are bigger, will that continue to survive the assault of improving skills over time, where that's what convinces people that there was some sort of like divine design for the game, and that's why we can't change things. And really, it was a product of trial and error, but it's held up remarkably well despite all of the other changes over the years and centuries.
Yep. Oh, he's so fast.
All right, a few more follow-ups. First, as I teased last time, if you're in the New York area, you may be interested in accompanying me and fellow listeners and other people who worked on the Ella Black podcast on a trip to Ella's grave. This is happening on Sunday, May 4th. Check the show page and podcast description for a link where you can RSVP if you're on Facebook, or if not, just find out the details and show up. Jacob writes in to say your discussion of the Brewers TV broadcast, mentioning your previous conversation about the John Brebbia spreadsheet, reminded me of a moment on opening day when the radio broadcast alluded to your prediction of the helmet tap ejection. Clearly, the broadcasting crew in Milwaukee has fine taste in baseball podcasts. Here's what Jacob's alluding to. I believe this is Lane Grindle on the call.
Here's Contreras, tying run aboard at first. Pitch home. It's a check swing at a strike on the inside corner.
I read, or maybe I heard somebody on a podcast talking about some concern that a pitcher would tap their hat out of habit in the first couple of days of the season, and the umpire would take it the wrong way. Like they're showing them up.
Not wrong. The 0-1. Misses high and outside. 1 ball, 1 strike. There was a moment when Contreras struck out back in the 3rd inning on a check swing. He tapped his helmet pretty aggressively on his way back towards home plate.
I may not have been the only person who predicted that, so perhaps this wasn't an Effectively Wild reference. But if it was, I'm glad that we're so popular among Brewers broadcasters. But give us a plug by name. Send some listeners our way. Another listener, named Ben, writes in to say, I wanted to add a point regarding Comerica Park's keyhole. That's the strip of dirt between the mound and home plate that was just removed. Comerica had been the last big league park to have one. While yes, the park has lost some uniqueness with the loss of the keyhole, it is still the only park that has a home plate-shaped batter's box, as opposed to every other park that has a circle-shaped one. Don't think I knew that. Also, if you want more uniqueness, or near uniqueness, PNC Park and Daikin Park, the former Minute Maid Park, are the only 2 parks that have a path to the batter's box from presumably the on-deck circle. The more you know. Finally, Andrew writes to say, I wanted to follow up with a related note about the owner bobblehead conversation. In Toronto, there is a large bronze statue, normally reserved for all-time great players, e.g. Willie Mays at Oracle, of former owner Ted Rogers. And after all, what is a statue but a large bronze bobblehead? This is the only statue at the ballpark. On the topic of the bobblehead being destroyed, the statue has drawn a fair amount of ire from fans. After Jose Bautista's contract negotiations turned south in 2016, a Twitter user threatened to throw the statue into the Lake Ontario harbor. Oh, we could have had a Curse of the Colonel, Hanshin Tigers sort of situation with Ted Rogers. Unless Rogers, quote, paid the man. Police were called, at the behest of Rogers' staff, and visited the fan at his house outside of Toronto before giving him a verbal warning. It is perhaps worth noting that Jose Bautista posted 1.9 FanGraphs WAR that year, and negative 0.9 the following year before leaving the Blue Jays. Perhaps the statue stays up for the foresight of not paying the man. If you'd like to pay us to keep making our great sports content and to get yourself some other stuff in the bargain, you can support Effectively Wild on Patreon by going to patreon.com/effectivelywild. The following 5 listeners have already signed up and pledged some monthly or yearly amount to help keep the podcast going, help us stay ad-free, and get themselves access to some perks. As have the following 5 listeners: Gwendolyn Fish, Ben Bloom, Amy Ackerman, Lauro Diazasati, and Mike Uline. Thanks to all of you. Patreon perks include access to the Effectively Wild Discord group for patrons only, monthly bonus episodes, prioritized email answers, playoff live streams, personalized messages, autographed books, discounts on merch, and ad-free FanGraphs memberships, and so much more. Check out all the offerings at patreon.com/effectivelywild. If you are a Patreon supporter, you can message us through the Patreon site. If not, you can contact us via email. Send your questions, comments, intro and outro themes to podcast@fangraphs.com. You can rate, review, and subscribe to Effectively Wild on iTunes and Spotify and other podcast platforms. You can join our Facebook group at facebook.com/group/effectivelywild. You can find the Effectively Wild subreddit at r/effectivelywild. And you can check the show page at FanGraphs or the episode description in your podcast app for links to the stories and stats we cited today. Thanks to Shane McKeon for his editing and production assistance. We'll be back with one more episode before the end of the week, which means we will talk to you soon.
Where do you go in a world of bad taste? For the good takes on baseball and life, with a balance of analytics and humor, philosophical musing, effectively wild, effectively wild, effectively wild.